Well, that's like the icing on the cake. You know, there was more that went into it, and I'm sure that you'll find out what I said. It was a four-letter word, and I was unaware. I thought the rules were different. I thought we were still playing the rules of last year at Grand Slam tournaments. I was misinformed. My understanding was that at this tournament that we were still playing the four-step as opposed to the three-step. I really don't have anyone to blame but myself in that sense for not being aware of that.
January 21, 1990. John McEnroe was defaulted from the Australian Open, the first time in men's singles at a Grand Slam. Not for violence, not for refusing to play, for words spoken in a lowered voice to a supervisor, by a man who believed he had one more chance before consequences became real. He didn't. The aftermath was immediate. Death threats, media chaos, 15,000 people booing a replacement match they didn't ask for. Paul McNamee pulling over on the Nepean Highway, screaming at his car radio. Gerry Armstrong lost in the service corridors of Flinders Park, unable to find his way out. The interesting part, always, is what comes next.
I mean, this is like a long story, you know, that culminates in me getting defaulted at a big tournament. I mean, I guess it was bound to happen. It's too bad. I don't feel good about it, but I can't say that I'm totally surprised.
This is Snap, the John McEnroe default saga. Episode 4, The Legacy. In professional tennis, you can't avoid people. The same circuit, the same tournaments, the same officials year after year. A player and an umpire who shared the worst moment of the latter's career don't have the luxury of simply never seeing each other again. They are both employed by the same game.
As there were a small group of us, and maybe I was the only professional at the tournament, then obviously I'm going to probably be put in the firing line and do John.
Brussels, 2 or 3 months after Melbourne. Armstrong is the most experienced official there. The math is unavoidable.
We came together at a tournament in Brussels fairly soon after, and it didn't end well. John was pretty obnoxious to a line umpire on that day, and it probably should have ended in a default, but it didn't. And Mac came back from a position that he was not going to win the match. So that was Brussels. I think that was 2 or 3 months later.
Still obnoxious. Probably should have defaulted. Did not. The template was so deeply embedded that even the most dramatic possible consequence hadn't rewritten it.
After that, it was pretty obvious John and I shouldn't be in the same space on a tennis court. So we decided that, all right, we'll give it a fair bit of time to calm down and I'll stay away from him. Which was fine until about 18 months later.
18 months of deliberate distance. And then, Wimbledon.
And in those days, we used to be assigned the finals midway through the second week. And I was assigned the doubles final that week. And we were a little bit behindhand with the weather. So John was still playing in doubles. And I ended up going into the locker room and chatting with him. The conversation was something like, I know you and I don't get on, but I just want to tell you, if you get to the doubles final here, I'm doing it. And he patted me on the back. He said, yeah, fine, nothing will happen.
2 men choosing, quietly and without ceremony, to move forward. Not to pretend Melbourne hadn't happened, but to decide it didn't have to be the whole story.
And it ended up being a real classic final. I think it was something like 19-17 in the 5th set. We came back the next day, 5 great sets and not a word. So that was kind of the end of it. But I still see John. I saw him the other week at the Laver Cup. We exchanged a few pleasantries.
Laver Cup 2023, 33 years after Australian Open 1990. It's fine now. And Di Larkin, the woman at the centre of the moment that started everything, whose name was never published, who went to Knox City Shopping Centre feeling the eyes of the world. She continued officiating, built a long and distinguished career on the composure she showed that afternoon.
Yeah, I think it gave me that inner strength that if I can sit there in front of Jon McEnroe and he's bouncing the ball 7 times and what's he going to do next and cop it, I can handle anything that life throws up at me. So I guess it just brought out an inner strength in me that despite what everyone else can see and have an opinion on, that I'm resilient, I can cope with this. But I wasn't doing it to try and further my career. It just happened so quickly. It's in the moment. And if I had my time again, I would still call that ball out.
20 years on the baseline at Wimbledon, Australian Open finals, US Opens. She traces all of it back to that holding.
Having been disqualified from a Grand Slam myself, I feel somewhat qualified to discuss it.
Tim Henman was 15 in 1990.
Massive tennis fan and pursuing my dreams, as it were. So, I watched any tennis that was on TV, and I was certainly going to be watching a major, that being the Australian Open. So, yeah, I'm not sure I necessarily watched it live, but I definitely watched the highlights or maybe the lowlights of it after.
1995, Wimbledon. First round, doubles. 2 sets up, close to victory.
I'd won my first match in singles ever on the Monday, and then on the Wednesday, I'd played Pete Sampras, who was top seed on court 1, and I'd lost in straight sets, but pretty good match. I was ranked, 180, 190 in the world at that stage. And then later on in the day, I was playing doubles with Jeremy Bates, and we were playing against Jeff Tarango and Henrik Holm. We were on the old court 14 that used to be a show court. And the irony was we were up 2-1. We were in the 4-set tiebreak. So we were close to winning.
The same machinery of the code of conduct, the supervisor, the chair, the sequence of officials, clicking into place around a different player in a different match for a different reason.
This wasn't a sort of toys out the pram moment. It wasn't sort of in frustration. We were up in the tiebreak, and then on my serve, sort of consecutive points, Henrik Holm first hit a complete sort of shank, miss hit winner, topspin lob winner to go 2-all, and then I served to Tarango and he sort of hit one off the throat of the racket, sort of for a pretty lucky winner inside out. So we were down 3-2 in the tiebreak, but still up 2-1. And I had the other ball in my pocket, and it was now their serve, and I sort of turned away in frustration to sort of go back to return, and I sort of hit the ball down the other end of the court, and the ball girl was on the other side of the net, and just as I sort of turned to hit the ball, she popped her head up to run across to the other side, and I hit her in the head, and it was purely an accident.
2-1, Holm, Tarango.
However, you've got to be responsible for your actions.
There's hard and very hard. I hit the ball hard. It wasn't as if I bulleted it in the fence. And she's standing there and she runs straight across in front of me.
That I understand, that you are actually responsible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Clear violation. Unsportsmanlike conduct. Default. Made 10 minutes. Game, set, match. Home training.
And if it then is a warning, a point penalty, and then there's another misdemeanor, it's a default. So I think that's why, upon reflection, when McEnroe actually got to the press conference, it was very difficult for him to try and point the finger elsewhere, because he hadn't interpreted the rules correctly. He hadn't realised that the rules had changed. So I think on that occasion the disqualification was absolutely right. In my occasion, disqualification was all wrong.
January 21, 1990 changed the tournament. In 1990, the Australian Open was still ascending. New venue, new date, luring the world's best players for the first time in years, still proving itself. And then the 4th round happened, and the tournament found itself at the centre of the biggest story in tennis.
It had to have been a tough call for Ken Farrar, the team that had to make the decision that Jon had pushed it too far and he needed to be defaulted, because understanding that Jon was a megastar, And the Australian Open was on its way to parity with the other majors, but it wasn't quite there. And it needed attention. It needed stars. And that was the beginning of the era when all the players were now coming to play every year. So that was a blow to a tournament. And there are commercial ramifications when one of your top players goes out. That might hurt your ticket sales the next few nights. So that's not their problem. That's the tournament organizer's problem, not the tournament supervisor's problem. But that's a tough decision, and one that I'm sure they didn't come to easily.
A blow, yes. And yet, the tournament had done something no Grand Slam had done before. It had looked John McEnroe in the eye and said, "Not here. Not now. Not this." That decision earned a kind of respect that prize money couldn't buy. It also ensured that everyone in the world knew the name Australian Open.
Amazing, right? Your tournament director is there coddling your player to make sure that he comes back the next year. That's how much power, importance that Jon has brought to the game in his career.
Colin Stubbs, the Australian Open tournament director, going to the hotel the next morning, putting McEnroe in a car to the airport, making sure he knew he was welcome to come back. The tournament that had defaulted him also needed him to come back.
To me, there was a lot of personality in the game. And in a one-on-one sport, it was extremely important, I felt, that people see that. They don't have teams they root for. They've got to respond to an individual, whether it's positive or negative. But there was also characters in a different way. And it was because of what I think we did, they tightened the rules and started to try to stifle that. And I think that hurt the sport.
For Peter Bellinger, the tournament referee who ordered the default and then spent the rest of the afternoon getting a replacement match onto court, the aftermath was administrative and then unexpectedly wide.
In 1990, after the tournament finished, I was actually living and working in Holland. And I got quite a bit of press in Europe, of course, as well. So when I went back to my job in Holland, it gave me a little bit of profile, I must say, so for a little while. I never really discussed the issue with any of the players either, but I do have a feeling that many of the players were not unhappy about what happened and that they were not happy with the way John McEnroe tried to control the game.
The locker room side of the story. The side that doesn't get captured on camera. McEnroe's ability to manipulate officials, disrupt rhythms, use intimidation as a competitive tool. Other players had watched it, resented it, been victims of it. Relief. Quiet and unspoken, but there.
I think he's done a great job of owning it in that moment, because I think it would have been very easy to have lobbed it all on Gerry and Ken and Peter and just said, hey, listen, these guys are at fault. It's nothing to do with me. I'm the big star here. Who wants to hear from them? And he didn't. And you're right. I didn't know the rules. That was a mistake. So clearly he did know how far he could push that parameter in all matches, because he clearly knew what the rule was, that where he was going to get ejected or not ejected. He just didn't know at that particular moment that the rule had changed. So I think credit to Jon that he's walked off the court there and he hasn't just kind of lobbed verbal grenades at everybody else and said it's their fault. He's actually said it was his fault. Most tennis players don't really know the rules particularly well. You could sit here, actually, there'll be a little trial for you guys in Australia, is to sit here and get sort of 7 or 8 rules in tennis and see how many of them the players actually know, because I'm pretty sure that most of them, well, there'll be some really sort of blind spots in players' understanding of what the rules are. And I think that even Pernfors, looking at him then, didn't realise that the default was coming. He looked just as stunned. You feel sorry for him, because it's not the reason why he's been defaulted is because of what Mikhail's done. It's the rules of the game. And then he goes up to him to try and shake his hand, and Jon wants nothing to do with it because he's sore at that particular moment. And you understand that. It's always easy to say, oh, you got to still shake the hand at the end. But like when you've just lost the match or you've been deefed in that manner, you can kind of understand the rawness of the emotion for somebody that's an ultimate competitor like Jon. He doesn't want to do it.
Pernfors, who had outbid McEnroe for the Stevie Wonder jacket 3 weeks earlier, stood at the baseline and watched the tournament walk off without him. No celebration, just a match that ended in a way no match is supposed to end. Bellinger, who went on to serve as Australian Open referee until 2005, was clear-eyed about what the default had cost.
The one thing about the default, McEnroe never ever won an Australian Open. And that year he probably could have. I think that was the year that he was really on track. His first 3 matches he won quite easily, although he stumbled in the 4th set with Fern Fours and then he was 2 sets to 1 up. I think he would have gone on to win that match. If it had gone to the 5th set, you never ever had a problem with McEnroe. Once it got serious, if it went to the 5th set, he always behaved himself. But that was the year I think he could have won the Australian Open, so the default may have stopped him from doing that.
From the man who ordered the default, that year he probably could have. 4 words carrying the whole weight of the story. Before Melbourne, the code had penalties. After Melbourne, it had precedent. A rule that defaults John McEnroe from a Grand Slam is a rule that means something.
It's kind of always been the problem of the sport. We don't seem to really mean what we say part of the time, but on that particular day, the sport meant what it said.
I think there'd be 1% of officials that would have been big enough to have actually pulled the plug and said, you know what, these are what the rules dictate. I'm going to kick you out of this tournament. That was a big, big call to make. Not many would have made it. I mean, Jon was one of those guys that has that kind of, that special quality. Call it aura, call it X factor, call it whatever you want, but he has it, and he has it in abundance. It radiates off him.
Which is precisely why enforcement required the 1% Petchey describes. The aura is real. The commercial stakes were real. The easier choice was to find a way to keep him in the tournament. Ken Farrar and Gerry Armstrong and Peter Bellinger found the harder way.
Speak with Mr. McEnroe. Yes, I did. And what was discussed? It's a private conversation. Was it obviously about the default? Well, lots of things. Has he indicated any intention on his behalf about returning next year? No, it's early days.
McEnroe didn't return to the Australian Open in '91, the only Grand Slam he voluntarily avoided in his final years on tour. The wound was specific to this place. He did return in '92, behaved himself, got through to the quarterfinals, his best result in Melbourne since the grass courts of Kooyong in '83. And then his professional career wound down. The era was over.
You know, I'm still very, very disappointed about that default.
Paul McNamee, who built the event McEnroe now returns to as a commentator, still carries the Hopman Cup decision. The compassionate call to use the old rules. The choice that meant McEnroe arrived 3 weeks later with the wrong mental map. Guilt doesn't follow logic.
In 15 years on the professional tour, I'm not counting the years I played on the seniors tour, that was the only time. So even though I was fairly close, probably, if you ask some umpires or officials or people around the world, that was the only time. So that was a really surprising change to the rules.
15 years. One time. The man who spent his whole career mapping the boundaries of the code of conduct found the edge exactly once.
It would have been preferable had I won one. Yes, no question about it. Who wouldn't want that? Everyone would, especially when you could taste it and you're so close and you feel like you should have. But at the same time, it made me maybe a better person, hopefully.
2 hedges in one sentence. The grammar of someone who would still prefer the title, willing to take the character development as a consolation prize, but not entirely convinced it's equivalent.
I've grown to appreciate and love the game in a way more after I stopped playing and when I sort of embarked on, it's not in a way a second career, which would be commentating, playing seniors tennis. And you see guys that it eats them alive and the angst that you feel. And most players feel that. And so I actually really enjoy if I can see players overcome that. I really respect that. And they're much better behaved than in my day.
He comes back to the Australian Open every year now, not to compete, but to be here in the commentary booth. walking the grounds of Melbourne Park, where the tournament has become exactly what it was trying to become in 1990.
I felt like there was a portion of fans that liked me. There might have been some others that weren't, quite so fond of what I was doing, and some of it understandably so. Hopefully, because I think Aussies are very passionate, that they appreciated the effort at least I gave. I'd go out, I'd try to give as good an effort, win, lose, or draw as I could. And so hopefully that was appreciated. But that, you only know that if you ask other people.
I mean, it's been a privilege for me. I mean, obviously there were times when it was trying for me as a young pro coming up, or a young junior player, for example, being in the shadows of Jon.
Patrick McEnroe has watched his brother's relationship with the sport evolve across those decades. From the court beside him in doubles, from the commentary booth, from the Laver Cup bench.
But I always wanted to follow my own path, whatever that is. It's happened to be, stay in tennis, because that's really what I wanted to do. So, of course, people still come up to me everywhere I go and, you're Jon's brother. And I always say, no, he's my brother. But we have a great relationship, and I think we both enjoy it now more than ever because we've been able to work together at the Laver Cup. We've been able to work together in television for many years, and at the tennis academy. So I think it's been an amazing ride. So I'm incredibly lucky and feel blessed that he's my big brother, and we still look out for each other.
He's my brother. The relationship that flows from Patrick outward, not the reputation that flows from Jon inward. They work together. They coach together. The thing that existed before 1990 is still there. Closer, maybe, for having been tested.
I've had several conversations with Jon McEnroe, but never about that incident. And we've always been on reasonably good terms.
Deal with it, then move forward. That was Bellinger's approach on the day, and it held. The incident is in the record. Both men are at peace with it. Despite the default, despite Brussels 2 months later, and 18 months of distance from Gerry Armstrong, despite never winning the Australian Open, despite all of it, and because of it, Jon McEnroe endured.
I've seen Jon bend those rules so many times, push it to absolute limits and do all sorts of stuff. Be really horrible and then turn around, 10 minutes later say, hey, you want to go and play some guitar, or, hey, how's the family? And I'm like, mate, you just absolutely screwed me over here. And now you're pretending like nothing's happened. He said, well, on the court, what's happened on the court, it happens on the court.
Pat Cash knew him as a competitor, as a rival, as the man across the net, but also as something the public version of McEnroe rarely allowed people to see.
I think Jon and I connected over the fact that we were so similar. Yeah. I mean, his father was a lawyer, my father was a lawyer, his father managed him, my father managed me. We both like rock and roll guitar, hard rock guitar. We both like having a bit of fun with some rock stars. We're both good athletes. We were both Catholics. We were both from big families. There was a lot of similarities. And more than anybody, people come and ask me, they say, what's McEnroe like? I just say, he's a seriously nice guy, but he can be an asshole.
Both things are true. The same person. And what gets lost in the noise of the behaviour, what Mark Petchey, the player who faced him, never lost sight of, was the tennis itself.
There was something magnetic about the way that he played tennis. There was something about the way that he saw what is a rectangle to everybody else, that he saw had shape, it had angles. The geometry that he used on a tennis court was something that was very special to me as a young player that was trying to play. I was in awe of how he played the game. One thing for that game to fit like a hand in a glove on a grass court, understood, but to make it work on clay, to make it work on a hard court when the ball's getting up high, that was something special. And I think his athleticism wasn't perhaps talked about as much because of the unique way he served and the side-on, the flatness of the hit and the rivalry with Bjorn. But I mean, Jon's athleticism around the court, his ability to go from A to B, from the baseline to the net, and cover that ground as gracefully as he did was perhaps a bit lost.
Bellinger, who had defaulted him, who watched him from referees' chairs across 22 years at the Australian Open, frames it simply.
I think he's fantastic as a commentator. That shows you, to my mind, it shows you why he was such a great tennis player, because he understood the game, absolutely understood the game, and that makes him a great commentator, but it made him a great tennis player as well, because he understood the angles of the game, he understood the psychology of the game, and as a commentator, he's as good as anybody I've ever heard. I think he's fantastic.
And more than 30 years on from the default, Bellinger had also noticed something else. Something that takes the story and gives it an unexpected coda.
I was referee for a seniors exhibition in Tokyo a couple of years. Borg and McEnroe and Connors, they were all there. And McEnroe, well out of the game by then, he still smashed the ball into the stadium and nearly hit a spectator. And, so, it was done for the crowd. So I think some of it was for the crowd, but in the serious days of his tennis, it was done to intimidate and to turn the game to his advantage.
The fire didn't go out. It just stopped burning people.
Jon McEnroe's biggest contribution to tennis is definitely the love of the sport, the passion he brought on the court and off the court as well for so many years when he was active, but also afterwards, when he was Davis Cup captain, Laver Cup captain, when he, as a commentator as well, he's still around, and he loves to talk about tennis. He loves to pass on his knowledge to the younger generation. I think that's important. A lot of the former players don't do that. They just step away from tennis and don't want to know anything about it anymore. But you can see it's a lifelong love for him, tennis.
Just an icon of the game. We're so lucky to have had him and still have him in the sport. Because you know what? Deep down, he loves the game and has never said, I don't love the game. And the other thing is he always is so complimentary of the other players. I mean, he is an icon of tennis.
The default was one afternoon, one match. The story that surrounds it spans 5 decades. Had that match just gone through, we wouldn't even be talking about it. The match that ended wrongly became the match everyone remembered. The tournament that enforced its rules became the tournament that proved its character.
The more you get to know Jon, the more time you spend around him, as I have now done later in my broadcasting career, you understand him because you see what happened that day. Because he's actually a nice person, he's actually a very intelligent person, and he accepted that moment, which I think made him even a better player. And people actually had a different type of respect. A lot of people, McEnroe, bad boy, bad behaviour. But this was a moment of actually maturity. And I think a lot of people were happy to see that.
A moment of maturity. People were happy to see that. And Bellinger, who has never once questioned the decision, saw something similar from a different angle. The man who always knew, who had mapped every boundary and tested every limit, who arrived at the Australian Open in January 1990 believing he understood the terrain, discovered the terrain had shifted while he wasn't looking. Bulletproof, until he wasn't. January 21, 1990. The most famous person in tennis walked off a Melbourne court and changed the sport by leaving it.
My mom used to make these great cakes, like chocolate cakes growing up, and they tasted incredible. But if she threw a little chocolate icing or vanilla icing on it, it tasted even better. So my goal was always to sort of be the icing on the cake, if possible, as far as commentary goes. And it's ironic that it's in some ways come full circle, getting a little bit more, maybe at least respect, hopefully a little love. And people see that there was more to me than they saw when they saw me on the tennis court at that time.
There was more to him. There was always more.
If you're still in the mix, I'm hitting a big number pretty soon. So I had a couple girls here in Melbourne. They looked to be about 20 in the hotel, and they're like, "Who are you?" And I was like, didn't say anything. And then they're like, "You're Jon McEnroe." And I was like, "Yeah." And then they followed that up by saying that I was the coolest guy they ever met. But I thought, hey, they're just kids, and they at least know who I am, so I'm doing something right.
Snap is an AO Originals podcast with Backchat Studios. Written and edited by Lochlainn Harte. Narrated and produced by Jon Hoevenaars. Supervising producer is Adrian Houghton. Original interviews by Shannon Davis. Recorded by Marcus Buttigieg. Executive producer is Xavier Muhlebach. Thank you to the guests whose voices helped tell this story.